Hello and welcome to today's Partner Academy Live webcast. Time to Thrive webcast series, Simplicity Performs, the trick to making great presentations that deliver. Welcome to the 8th of our 12-part monthly webcast series to help you win in the new economy, compete to win, hit your sales targets, and thrive in our mobile world. Join us the second Wednesday of every month at 8 a.m. Pacific for a new session dedicated to improving your sales performance. Participate on Twitter Live at #TimeToThrive8. Our presenter today is Dave Underhill, who is a WPC speaker and a member of Underhill Training. Now, without any further delay, it is my pleasure to hand it over. Dave, you now have the floor.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to share some ideas with you today about how do you really get your ideas across when you're in front of customers, partners, and even for the Microsoft folks, internal presentations that you might have to give. Since we've got a variety of folks here, it looks like we've got the sales, architects, technical sales from across the world. Again, I want to welcome good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might happen to be. And since we do have that broad range, I also want to get a sense of today's topics. What is most important to you? What are the challenges that you face? So we have a very quick poll here is, which of the following is your biggest presentation challenge today? That might be, you don't know much about the audience, you don't have time to prepare, how do you keep up with technology, etc. So take a second here. Give us your response about, from today's topics, what is your biggest challenge right now? Okay, so looks like we've got, oh boy, about half the folks are saying keeping the audience engaged during the presentation, and then about a quarter saying little time to prepare, which is very typical. Like, we're all busy doing our jobs. So how do I find time to really make sure that my presentation content is focused and targeted to the audience? We all get nervous. We all need to kind of keep up with technology, but keeping people engaged, especially with technical topics, and then finding the time to prepare is really critical. And that's what we're going to cover today. So given that, the topics that we're going to focus on really is driven not just by your challenges, but also a very interesting survey that I saw about a month ago where they interviewed executives at mid to large-sized enterprises, and they asked them, how often do salespeople demonstrate these certain behaviors that lead to effective sales relationships? And so they went through and they asked them, and then they said, how often do they do these behaviors? How often do they demonstrate? And the first one really was around, how often do the salespeople identify the business measures that are most important to your company? They asked, do they show a deep understanding of the external forces, competitive factors, what's going on that really also affect your company? Are they able to show ROI and other financial aspects of whatever technology solution they're wanting you to invest in? Do they show the ability to develop a value proposition? And that might be either a case study or an example. Are they able to really show the business value again? And do they focus their solutions on the business impact versus just pushing product or pushing technology? So as you see here, is really the executives are expecting to have a business conversation about how technology enables them to achieve their business goals. And then the results of the survey were, right, let's start at the bottom and go to the top. The bottom, only 19% of the time did they feel like the salespeople, could be technical sales, could be straight relationship sales, focused on business impact. They felt that 8 out of 10 times people were just pushing product. They didn't actually have the ability to show case studies or a value proposition. And then at the very top, again, the ability to show what the business measures or show they had an understanding of what those were. And what I take away from this is, again, I think the same point is executives, and we all know this, are really wanting to have a business-focused discussion, even though you're talking about technology. And while they see a gap here in how salespeople are approaching them and creating a dialogue with them around those type of issues, That's a challenge. I mean, you have your own challenges around finding the time and keeping people engaged. And actually, if you think about it, that whole thing about keeping your audience engaged might somewhat relate to this missed expectation or this communication gap with execs. You're presenting one kind of information and they're expecting something else, and they tune out. So while that is a challenge, it is also an opportunity. And that's why we're covering the topics we're going to do today, which is if you can show up and you can flip these numbers around to a positive for yourself by having that business before technology conversation, you can differentiate yourself and stand out from your competition. All right. Given that, those challenges that come up, how do we address those? How do we be successful? And while the title says presentations that deliver, the message that I have for everybody today is that you need to deliver value. We talk about the value of our technology, of our solutions to the customers. And I think we need to continue that by saying our conversations and our communication with our customers and our prospects and our partners need to deliver value every time. And if you do that, then you're more likely to move through the sales process and get the chance to offer your solutions to the customers. So today what we're going to do, talk about how do you target your presentation. How do you make sure that the information you're going to present is relevant and of interest to your audience? Secondly, plan what you're going to say. Even though you don't have a lot of time, we're stressed, pushed for time to prepare, how do you have a plan going in of what's the most important information to communicate? Third is how do you engage the audience? So we'll talk in a number of ways, 2 or 3 ways that you can really make sure that you've got their attention and are providing value. And lastly is, although just a few people mentioned about the nervous energy, I think we all have those butterflies that come up when presenting. So just a quick refresh on how do you perform effectively in a presentation, whether that is standing up formally or whether it's seated one-on-one or sitting around the table. So that's our topics. We are going to take questions all the way through, so if you have questions, feel free to submit those at any time. I'm going to stop after that first topic area, target your presentation, and take questions there, and then we'll also do Q&A at the end. So please, if you have challenges or questions, ask them as they go through. All right, so these topics really came out of my experience over the last 20 years and my passion, which is really around the topic I call moving ideas. So I started out as a marketing guy, got involved in training salespeople, training customers. I started my company in 1993, and I really found in working with companies like Microsoft and Intel and HP that the challenge was in those complex sales environments or those challenging sales environments, how do I take my idea from getting someone on the phone to schedule an appointment to signing the deal? How do I move that idea with a prospect or a customer? And how do I move that idea actually even within my organization? So at Microsoft, I started out working a lot with the OEM division, sales and marketing people there, relationship managers and account managers. Also did a lot of work currently, doing a lot of work currently with the enterprise architects, who are the high-level folks that are working with the large Microsoft enterprise clients on their enterprise technology strategy. And also doing some work, and actually today after this session, I'm going over to work with the licensing group at Microsoft, which I know that you all run into in various ways, shapes, and forms. So again, it's really about how to help those folks at Intel. I work a lot with the sales and marketing people, both in the U.S. and also in Asia. And we have a program that we created called Strategic Articulation, which really is around strategic presentations. You know, how do you at the highest level get people to buy in on the business case for your idea? And that's on the technology side. I work at Touch Cancer Center with their scientists. And again, you might think, well, these guys are just working in the lab. But the reality is they have a project or a program of cancer research that they're working on, and they have to get people to buy in on that also, to fund their presentations, to fund their research. And I do a lot of work with startup companies, entrepreneurs who are going out and talking to investors, trying to get them to get a meeting, show their business plan, show their proposal. And so the common theme in all these really is around moving ideas, but also it's those topics that we just mentioned, which is how do you target your presentation? How do you really engage people? How do you have a plan and a compelling story to tell? So while there's a pretty diverse group of customers here, you know, the reality is there's some common themes. All right, so let's talk about targeting your presentation. And really what this means is going back to those different audiences that you have to present to, internal, external, president, executive level, technical group, sales folks. How do you make sure that what you're presenting has value? Now, the process we'll go through is really just 4 steps. It's making sure that you know your audience, you've got a message, you have an objective for the presentation, and also that you're able to sell the benefits of moving forward with the sales process. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to create a brand new presentation for every situation. What it does mean is that you have to take a little bit of time beforehand to make sure that you're presenting the right information to the right audience at the right time. And just a very quick story is this really came clear to me is I actually was doing work a number of years ago with a marketing group at Microsoft. And they had just got back from a roadshow where they had some marketing programs they're going to roll out to the OEM customers. And really it was a lot around innovation, building market share, spending dollars to get the awareness out there. And so they were pumped. They're very excited about taking this message and these programs out to the different OEM customers. And so as I was walking through this targeting process, there's about 6 folks in the room in addition to the marketing manager. And as we were going through the process, the marketing manager he jumped out of his chair and says, "Oh my God, that's what happened at Dell." And I go, "Well, tell me more about that. What happened?" He goes, "Well, we have this deck that our walking around deck about our new marketing programs, about building market share, about innovation, about new products and ideas. And we've gone to HP and just had a great presentation. They loved it. They wanted to have a lot of follow-up. And so we said, oh, this is great. Everybody's really excited about this." And they took the deck and they went over to Dell. And at the time, this is kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s, you know, if you know about the different cultures, HP at the time was very, you know, innovative, new product development, printers, et cetera. You know, Dell was a very operationally focused company. They were about, you know what, we're not going to invest our dollars until we find that there's a proven market and we can make money from day one. So when they took this deck and they went to Dell, they just got hammered. They got feedback. They said, "You guys don't understand us. What are you talking about innovative new markets and spending money to build market share? Don't you know that we only go in when we can make money from day one?" And so they almost got kicked out of the building. Not literally, but, you know, it didn't go well. And the marketing manager said, "That's it. We had a standard deck. We didn't tailor it to the audience. We could have used the same deck, but just presented it a different way." He says, "You know, we lost an opportunity there with Dell to really build a relationship and to move these programs forward." And so that was a great example for me of you don't have to create a new deck every time, but just take a little bit of time to figure out which of this information that I have is going to be most important, is going to be most relevant to the audience. So I think it was a great story because it was just a very dramatic response from that marketing manager. So how do you target your presentation? Number 1, know the audience and the territory. How do you understand what's important to that group as far as the information that you're going to be presenting, whatever your topic happens to be? So obviously, what's their experience with your company at Microsoft? Right? What do you want to get across to them based on how well they know you? Is it an existing relationship? Is it a prospect relationship? You know, if they have Microsoft product, what's been their experience? So again, where are you at in that connection with the customer? Secondly, obviously the background of the folks in the room, their roles in their organization, but also the decision-making process. Both where are you at in the sales process? Is this the very first meeting? Are you in the middle of the process, getting buy-in from different stakeholder groups? Or maybe is this something where you're at the very end closing the deal? So also, it's what stage are you at? But also, what is their process? Who makes the decisions, and what criteria do they use? What's important to them? Communication style. I know we've all had different training on this, but I think this is really about how you engage the different audiences, the way that you have a big picture decision maker, you have detail-oriented, business-focused folks. So making sure you have an understanding of those styles, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Their knowledge of the topic, depending on the role in the organization. How much do they know about Microsoft solutions, technology? You can also think about this, their knowledge not just of your topic, but in their organization, what's their level of technology maturity? Right? Are they at the basic level? Are they at the dynamic level? So how are they approaching the use of technology to drive their business? Their business goals, challenges, and priorities. Like that Dell example, their priority at Dell was operational and only going in when they had a proof that they can make money from day one. So that's their priority, so understanding what those are. And I think even more importantly is how they use IT to serve their customers. One of the concepts I got from doing that early work with the OEM division is looking through your customer to their customer. So if you have a real estate company and they have offices all around the country and they have buildings that are managing all around the country, well, that's the customer you're presenting to, but their customers are the people who are leasing space in those buildings. So how do they use IT to serve those customers? So because at the end of every IT process or IT capability is a service that that company provides to a customer. And again, our job as the salespeople, as relationship managers, as architects, is to help our customers serve their customers. And so when you start out, the first step in targeting your presentation is really to get a clear sense of the audience and the territory so that you can understand what do they currently know, what are their attitudes about my topic, i.e. and about Microsoft, and three is what's going to be most important to them when I present my information. This really helps you to filter out and say, hey, I've got an 85-slide deck, boy, it could take 2 hours, but I've only got a half-an-hour meeting. This helps you to get an idea of what's going to be most important to the audience. Ideally, you would do this work, this background work, either by having an existing relationship or doing some research on your own, talking to other people, colleagues, other partners who maybe have dealt with this company. But I think there is no perfect set of information or complete set of information. So you may have to ask some questions and gather some of this information in your first discovery meeting with the customer. So that's step one, is really knowing the audience and the territory. And this is really knowing more about the audience itself. The other part of it is getting a sense of, for yourself, is that communication style, which is how do you engage the audience. And I know a number of people have probably been through like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC, different kind of personality assessments. This one that we'll talk about here really does come from more the DISC or the social styles type of analysis. And really what it does is it puts together personality characteristics and says, you know what, there's certain characteristics that we can cluster together that tells us, you know, how does this person like to be communicated with? How do they make decisions? What's the best way to work with them? And so starting from left to right, you can have the dominant driver personality, more the CEO, entrepreneur, sociable influencer, perhaps sales and marketing side. We'll go into detail here in a second. Amiable and steady. Customer service and support is a major focus. Or the conscientious, objective, analytical, finance controller type person. So the key here, part of understanding your audience, but also understanding yourself, is get an idea of communication style. So let's take a look individually. Dominant driver. Again, that executive, CEO, entrepreneur type personality. They're assertive, they're direct, action-oriented, focus on results. Hey, let's get to the bottom line, no chit-chat, tell me why you're here. And to engage them, provide options, and let them decide. They're used to being in control and making decisions. So in this dominant driver personality, you're going to get that sense that they're impatient, they're moving fast, they want results. So give them options about how they can get those results. So as we're going through these, keep a mental note for yourself about where your primary personality style might be, because we'll do a quick poll at the end. Secondly, your sociable influencer. They're outgoing, animated. Their focus is on people, involvement. Who's involved? How do we get people involved? How do we roll this thing out? Who is using the product or service? So since they're very outgoing and animated, and if your style tends to be more low-key, more analytical, you've got to show some enthusiastic energy and provide ideas about how we can get this thing going. They're looking for that energy and enthusiasm. For the amiable, steady person, calm, listens well, very relationship-oriented, so might avoid conflicts. And again, their focus is on customer support, service, implementation plans. So as you can see here, as you're going through and talking to different folks in an organization, or maybe it's just one person, there's different things that are going to be important to them. And the last one is your conscientious, analytical person. They're very well organized, less emotional, objective, logic, prioritize, criteria is important. So what's really critical here is to connect whatever solution you are proposing to them back in a logical way to the business challenges or business results that the company wants to achieve. Right? They're going to look for that logical connection all the way back through. So one of the ways you can do that is to emphasize your past record of how you've worked with similar companies to accomplish the goals that are the same goals that this particular audience has. Now, key here is you've got to know your communication style first. And the reason for that is whether you are a dominant driver, you're amiable, you're conscientious, that will show through in how you like to present your ideas. So a great example is I was working with a small firm. Their conscientious analytical person happened to be a technical specialist who they would bring in to talk to the dominant driver, entrepreneurs, or presidents and go through the technical aspects of whatever the proposal solution was. They might have a sociable influencer person. So the typical default presentation, as you might imagine, for the conscientious analytical person is lots of detail, lots of complex graphs, lots of explanation, really about the technology. And what was happening in this company was that the salesperson would establish a good relationship and make some progress with the organization, with the prospect. But the dominant driver, the entrepreneur, the president of that company, really was more business-oriented, more results-focused. And so when the technical person came in and just did a data dump on them, just started talking about technology, it slowed down the sales process. So we worked together to help their technical folks really get to the bottom line right off the bat, talk about the results, and then have a little bit of backup on the technology that will get the company to those business results. And once we're able to make that shift and help that person be more flexible in their style of presenting, they were able to engage the dominant driver, the executive level folks, much more effectively by focusing not on the technology, but on the business results that the technology will deliver. So take a quick look here. Here's our profile, and we'll do a quick poll here, and I'll make sure that, thanks for your comments, I'll make sure I show the poll results, is what is your primary communication style? Okay, and then I call this the cheap psychological profile. There's no validity in this quick survey, but I think the main point here is to get an idea of, what is it that I prefer to do in organizing and presenting my ideas, but also how do I be flexible with other folks. All right, I'm going to click the results are shown here. See if we can get that. So on my screen it shows that results are shown. If not, I apologize. I'll go through these real quick. Dominant driver, we had 16%. A sociable influencer, about a third, that sales group here. Amiable and steady, 22%. Conscientious thinker, the more the analytical. I know we had some technical sales, some architects on the line. That was about 28%. So a good mix here of both your sociable influencer, which you might imagine would be pretty typical for a sales audience, but also some of your analytical folks were involved maybe on the technical or technical sales side of things. So the key here with the poll and this understanding is, all right, I've taken some time, I understand who the audience is, some of that background information about the audience. What's really critical for me to be successful in engaging that group, knowing who they are, is to have at least a beginning understanding of my style of communication communication and how I can build some flexibility to be successful with people who might be looking at things a different way. All right. So step one, know the audience and the territory. Step two, deliver a clear message. So for every presentation, what is the key takeaway that you want the audience to understand? So you can have a half an hour meeting. It could be a conference call. It could be a phone call to set up a one-on-one. Think about what's the one key idea I want them to take away from this topic or this presentation. Now, that could be about a product. You get a lot of messaging from corporate around BI, around CRM, around the cloud. There's lots of corporate messaging, which is really clear, and you can use that. But it also might be you want to get people to buy in on the need to do an organizational assessment. And that first meeting with the president, saying, before we move forward, we should really look at your business drivers, your business goals, but also your existing infrastructure, so we get a complete picture of what we need to do. So your message to them might be, hey, there's value in doing this assessment before we move forward. So for a product, I pulled this off of one of the older cloud decks, it might be, the great thing about the cloud today is you can have it your way. You can customize it. You can go hybrid. You can go private cloud. There's ways that you can take advantage of this technology, this new approach to doing business, in a way that helps you achieve your goals in a very cost-effective manner. But the message of all that is you can have it your way, the way that works for your organization. So step two, have a clear message. Step three, be real specific on what you want to have happen in the presentation. What is the objective that will move the sales process forward? Now, again, you'll be working with the customer on this. They've got their process of engaging with you, but as a salesperson or technical sales, or even if you're an architect trying to move a proposal through a company or a prospect, there's a series of steps, so be real clear. So if we're talking cloud, your action step might be really to get the person on the phone the first time. Maybe you're calling the president saying, hey, at the end of this call, I want to make sure that we set a meeting. So the goal might be, hey, let's meet next Monday at 3 o'clock. So that's your objective or action step. And again, when we think about presentations, it's not just the formal PowerPoint presentation. It's the phone call to set up the first meeting. It's you're in the first meeting and you want to meet the technical people. It's you've got the technical people and you want to put the proposal together. So think about your action step for each presentation or communication that you have with a customer. It could be you were fortunate enough to get a meeting with the president, and the goal or the next step is to do that organizational assessment. So your goal, you might say something like, a great next step is for our technical groups to get together and assess your business goals, your IT infrastructure, so we can get that complete picture of where you are, where you're going, and then start to decide what kind of projects, what kind of programs and technologies will enable you to get there. So be real clear on your objective and action step. That will move the process forward. Now, you've got to sell them on the benefits of moving forward. You've got to sell them on the value of meeting with you one-on-one. You've got to sell them on the value of doing that assessment or signing the proposal to get the project moving. So if we take that same example from the cloud and say the action step is we want to assess your current business goals, your current IT infrastructure to give us a complete picture. They're going, oh, that sounds good. My people are super busy. We don't have time to pull them off, to work with you, have a bunch of meetings. What are we going to get out of this? Well, what you'll get out of it is the ability to identify and prioritize projects that drive your business objectives. It will give you that objective view or that business-focused view of where you're at, your current state, your desired state of where you're heading, and how the different projects that we will identify can get you there so you can have a way of identifying where's the best place to spend your money. Right? And they go, wow, if I could have that picture, if I could have that information in front of me as we're making these IT decisions, that would be tremendous. Right? So that's the benefit of moving forward. So think about from your audience perspective, why would they want to continue to move forward with the engagements that you have? All right, so the payoff. Why do we do this? Again, you don't have to create a brand new presentation every time, but what you do need to do is, even if you have an existing deck, is just take a look at it, take a fresh look and say, all right, we've been using this deck for a while, or I do a lot of this, oh, here's the deck from Microsoft. Here's their partner deck around this topic or this technology. Wow, it's 65 slides. Boy, you know, most of these really aren't relevant to most of my clients. How do I decide how to use this deck, or which slides to use, or what slides to modify a little bit? So the payoff from this, taking time to do this, know your audience, the messaging, the action step, really is that you're more likely to be on target and to move the sales process forward because you're providing valuable information to your customer or your product or your prospect that helps them to make the decisions. And that's the focus really here with presentations that deliver value, is you're really providing information to the customer or to the prospect that helps them in their decision-making process. Now, as you look at it here, you've got an example of, you know, a very generic sales process. Right? On the left-hand side, every interaction has an audience, a message, an action step, and benefits. So whether it's getting the president on the phone and trying to set up a meeting, that'll move the process forward. You're actually meeting with the president. Maybe you brought your technical person on cloud technology, and you're getting them to buy in on conducting an assessment. Right? That's moving the process forward. You meet with a technical team, and you have an action step at the end of those meetings to prioritize. And then the final one, you've got the president, the COO, maybe the IT director in there. And so you want to approve your proposal. So as you look at any presentation, you want to make sure, obviously, that you've got all the information in there that will help them say, you know what, let's move forward with this. This has value. I want to continue the discussion. So we're going to take any questions that you might have. There's nothing really in the queue right now. So if you do have any questions you want to ask, I know some of the things that you talked about, we're not having enough time to do this.
We actually have one question.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. It's actually a two-part question. First part is, do you have any tips on how to match or mirror styles quickly, you know, clues or indicators of the other person's style?
Okay. So the first part of that one is, yes, I think part of it is, and we'll talk a little bit about delivery skills in a little bit, is kind of going in, taking a breath, and focus on who you're presenting to. So say if it's a one-on-one. Oftentimes, you know, when I was first starting out my business, I would be so much thinking in my head about what I wanted to present that I really wouldn't cue in or pay attention to some of the things that would tell me about communication style. So then step one is just be aware, right? Focus on who you're talking to. Things that you can look for. Let's just take a look back on some of our styles. The dominant driver. You know, that person is going to be very action-oriented. When I get them on the phone, right, I've got them on the phone, you know, oftentimes it'll be something like, Edward's here, right? It'll be very crisp and clipped, right? They're very impatient. The sociable, amiable person, you get them on the phone and they'll have, you know, it'll be more of that, hey, you know, thanks for the call. You know, I heard about you, and there'll be a little bit of that chit-chat at the beginning. So pay attention to how they interact with you initially, and that can give you an idea of, okay, that's how you mirror a little bit. And by mirroring, what we mean is you don't try to be someone that you're not, but what you do is you start to recognize, okay, this person likes to be communicated with in this way. It's different than the way I would typically communicate, but I've got to be flexible because this is how they like to have information. So pay attention, you know, the typical things you can kind of, just how they communicate and interact with you. What are the questions they ask you? Right, the driver is going to ask you, hey, well, how have you done this before? Hey, what's the results of doing this? It's going to be very crisp and very clipped. The sociable, amiable, the sociable person, the influencer, is going to ask you, well, who else is using this? Who do we need to get engaged and involved with? So think about both their style of the words that they use, but also the questions that they ask. A great example is I'm in the amiable, steady category. You know, I'm in training, helping people, support, those type of things. And as you get introduced to a guy at Nike, he was a kind of a mid to high level executive. And when I first came in, since I'm the amiable person, I like to chit chat and how was your weekend? gosh, I see pictures of your kids there. Where do they go to school? And I got no response. It wasn't like he even responded. He just kind of ignored what I was saying and kind of moved back onto, all right, why are we here? And so what I understood from that, this is a long time ago, what I understood from that was after that first meeting, it's like, this guy's really abrupt. He's really brusque. And what I learned from that was he wanted to focus on business first, and then we can talk and chit-chat later. I tended to focus on, let's do the chit-chat and build that relationship first and then get to work. And so by paying attention to that and going, okay, he wants to really start with that as the initial focus of our meetings, we would just meet, we'd coach, we'd get the work done, and as we were walking back out to the elevator on the way out, we'd start talking about family and soccer and those types of things. So pay attention, see how they communicate with you initially, either on the phone or in person, and then also what kind of questions do they ask.
Okay. So then the second part of that question is, what about when you're meeting with groups, when there are different styles in the same room, and how to find that middle ground, or how to target them as a group, focus on the key decision maker versus the person who's an influencer.
Right. So I think a couple of things there is, one is as you look at that first step in targeting, which is, right, understanding the audience, one of the points there was understanding their roles, their decision-making process, who is the key decision maker versus the influencer. So that's one part of that. The second part is if you have a group and there'll be different styles in the room, we won't go back to that slide, but what you can do is you can take a look and say, all right, my dominant driver person, they're going to want to focus on business results. My sociable person, they're going to be looking at, well, who else is using this and how do we get people involved and engaged? My amiable, steady person, well, they're going to want to know about customer support, how are you going to implement this thing, or are you going to support us after you sell us the technology and the product? And then the analytical person is going to want to know, well, what's the logic behind this? So as you're presenting your proposal or your idea to them, make sure you cover all those bases. The results, the people, the support, the logic. And if you make all those parts of your case, then you'll be providing them with the information they need.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Let's move forward. So that's the first part, right? Targeting your presentation. Then you have an idea of, okay, who am I talking to, what's important. Plan what you're going to say. Now, I know, let's go back to it. I don't have a lot of time. How do I plan? How do I make sure that I don't take the deck that I've got and present it to that same group at Dell as I did at HP? So here's the key. And this is a quote that I really like. It's from Abraham Lincoln, who was 16th president of the U.S., as many of us know. Here's his quote: "He can compress the most words into the smallest ideas of any man I ever met." And I just laughed when I first read this, which is basically saying, you know what, there's a lot of people out there that say a lot, but it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't have any value or impact. And so I think get to the point is the main takeaway on this one, which is as you're planning your ideas, once you have an idea of what's important to your audience, be concise. Get to the point. Because they're busy, and your job is to, in a very efficient and effective way, show them who you are and talk about the solutions that you can provide to them. So create a plan. This is a template, actually, that I'll make available to everybody. It's a great one, both for taking an existing presentation and saying, gosh, do I have a structure to this, or is this just a bunch of slides? And you can kind of see here on the left-hand side in that blue bar, you've got an opening, a body, and a closing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The key here is have a plan of what you're going to say. This is great for your individual presentation for yourself, if it's more formal, and you say, all right, well, how am I going to start this thing? What are the 3 or 4 points? It's also great if you're doing a team presentation, right? You've got to get 2 or 3 people involved. Maybe you're bringing a technical person with you. So I think the key with that is, have a plan. You can use this template. Let me show you an example. Is 3 or 4 points. So based on what you know about the audience, and that's the second point, audience focus, based on what you know about their situation, think about what are the 3 or 4 things, what are the 3 or 4 chunks or pieces of information about my topic that the audience needs to know in order to feel comfortable saying, you know what, that makes sense, let's take the next step. So you can take an existing deck, look at it and say, you know, is this the right information to help my customer or my prospect make their decision? 75% rule, what does that mean? Well, what it means is when you go in and you have a 30-minute meeting with a customer and they've agreed to do that, don't come in with a 30-minute presentation. Cut it down. So 75% of 30 minutes would be about 20 minutes or so, 21 minutes. So give time for interaction. Give time for questions so that you're not trying to hurry through your last 2 slides before the end of the meeting because people are already getting up and leaving. So with your plan, pick the 3 or 4 points that are going to have the most impact. Make sure that they're focused on what's important to the audience and build in a buffer so that you have time for questions and interaction and providing that value. An example of that can be real simple is, let's go back to that cloud example. You might open saying, you know, connect it back. What's the background here? Why are we here in this meeting? Give them your message. Review the agenda. So they go, all right, this person's got a plan for what we're going to talk about today. And you might want to spend the first part of the presentation having a discussion and get their understanding of what's going on with the cloud. Talk about Microsoft Cloud Solutions. Talk with them and have a dialogue about how do we go about identifying which of these solutions would work for you. And then, well, what is this assessment that we're talking about? What are the steps and what's the value to you? And then, you know, closing out. You want to get their approval to move forward with the assessment. So this is a way, this is a hypothetical cloud discussion, but have a plan of what you want to say going in. And critical, like we talked about at the beginning here, is you want to engage your audience at the very beginning. People are busy. They want to know that you're going to provide value in this presentation. So the key is a strong opening. And I think we all know this, but we get busy. So if you're busy, you don't have time to rehearse the whole presentation for every meeting that you have, practice your opening. Make sure that you know what you want to get across in that first 1 or 2 minutes that shows the customer or the prospect that you've got a plan and going to add value. So connect with them. Give them that background of why are we here. So this could be, let's talk about that cloud scenario. This might be that last presentation to the CEO, the COO, the IT director to get buy-off on your plan. You might go, 4 weeks ago, we moved forward with an assessment. The reason for this was that you said you'd like to have that complete picture of all the different drivers, all the different technologies, and then to be able to prioritize. So that's why we're here today. Confirm the agenda. We're going to cover what the plan is, what the options are, what the investment spend is. At the end of this, we're going to ask for your approval to move forward, and then confirm it with them. You know, is this fit for you? Is there anything else that you want to cover? And it's not just for this last close the deal presentation, but in your first meeting. You know, reconfirm that what you heard from them was they like to talk about cloud solutions or options. So here's my plan for today. Does that work for you? Is there anything else that you want to cover? So confirm that agenda, and then go ahead and talk about your message. You know, what we'll show you today is that you can configure a cloud solution your way, so it takes your business where you want it to go. So your opening for any presentation, connect, talk about why we're here. Cover your agenda and confirm that that has value for them, and then state your message. So create that strong opening. So you got their attention. You're engaging them at the very beginning. Then you want to continue to engage them throughout the presentation. You want to make sure that what you're presenting has value for them, and you want to find a way to make sure that you can assess whether or not they're engaged in the presentation. So one way to do that is to ask questions. Create a conversation. So rather than thinking about the presentation as, okay, I've got to go give them this information. They want to hear about the cloud. Well, I've got this 35-slide cloud deck. Ask questions. Create a conversation. Now, they could be questions like this, which are more sales and discovery-oriented. Hey, what % of your data center is virtualized? You know, what's been your experience? You know, as you look to the future, how do you see that ratio changing? So it might be questions like that. Or it could be questions that you didn't have an opportunity to find out certain information about the customer that's important. How many servers do you have? What are they used for? Where are your data centers located? Questions that will help you understand what's important to the customer. And this is actually part of your presentation, right? If you don't have that information ahead of time, plan what questions you want to ask as part of your presentation. So before jumping in with your content, you can also take some time to figure out, all right, what are the questions I need to know in order to understand what's important to the audience. So plan your questions just like you plan your content. So that's one way to engage. Have a conversation. Number 2, build your case with what we call external validation. So they're going, well, that's what you say. Well, who else is using this? What are the trends that are going on? So you can do things like cover analyst report, articles that talk about industry trends or government regulations. And it's not necessarily a Gartner report, but you can show people that this is what's going on in their industry in general. You can also use some case studies and say, well, here's what's going on with a company that's just like yours. Now, the ideal with a case study is, say you're talking to a coffee company and you go, well, guess what? We have a case study for Green Mountain Coffee. They're the same size as you are. They have the same CRM issues about wanting to expand, how they reach out to customers. Here's a case study of how they did that. That's the ideal. You may not have that perfect match for every case study, but what you can do, actually, is for any case study is just to find that element of the case study that really helps you to make the point you're trying to get across. So if it is a CRM case study and you are talking about to a customer about their interest in CRM, then highlight that part of it that relates back to their company, even though it might be a different industry. And the key with that, again, is connect it back to the customer issues. Whatever part of that industry trend or analyst report or case study, take out the part of that data, that information, that is relevant to the customer situation. And then another way is make your data relevant. It's what I call the what and the so what solution. Oftentimes we'll talk about the what. Moving your local labs onto a cloud platform reduces your hardware cost by 80%. Now that in itself is pretty compelling, right? You might have a dollar figure associated with that. Or you might be talking about a technology capability with BI or, business intelligence, whatever it is. Take that information and relate it back again to the customer. So the so what is money you used to spend on your CapEx can go to more strategic projects, such as CRM, that will drive revenue. So when you're sharing data, statistics, information, talk about the what and the so what. So they go, okay, that's what that means for me. That's what that improvement in productivity can mean for our organization, and not just a general statistic or a general, piece of information. So engage in the audience, have a conversation, right? Use some case studies and other ways to show them that there are other folks that are still using the cloud. There are folks that are exploring the cloud. There are folks that are in the process of figuring out what they want to do as far as this new technology. Use some case studies to do that, and then use the what and the so what to give them an idea of, all right, here's what this means for you. Again, it's delivering value in your communication, relating what you're presenting back to what's important to the audience. All right, and eventually and finally, you've got to deliver your presentations. And that could be standing up formally, it could be sitting down around a table. So what are some of the keys with that? And to me, delivering with confidence means a couple things. I think first off, it really is around a mindset that I call a service mindset. I think when I talk to folks around presenting, a lot of times the anxiety or the nervousness that people have is about making sure that they don't say something wrong or make a mistake. It's more focused on their own performance. And when I work with people, I pretty much talk about the key here is to think about how can I help my customer or this prospect be successful? How can I give them the information that they need so that they can make the decisions around technology that are going to help their business be successful? So adopt a service mindset. As you're putting your presentation together, again, think about what does my audience need to know in order to take the action step that I'm asking them to take. So that be of service to your audience. Secondly, pause and breathe. We all get nervous. So one of the things you can do is breathe in through your nose, take a deep breath. You can do this before you start your presentation. Maybe you're out in the office waiting for the meeting. Maybe you're getting prepared to actually do a more formal presentation. So pause and breathe helps you to relax. It also makes sure that if you are pausing and taking a breath, it also makes sure that you're listening. You're not talking all the time. So once you've asked a question and someone's responding, pause and take a breath. And then finally is in larger groups, I think especially someone mentioned earlier about presenting to larger groups, is think about presenting as a series of one-on-one conversations. Sometimes in groups of 5, 10, or even more, if you have larger group presentations, there's that sense that you're up there, you don't really make a connection. You have this hazy feeling in front of your eyes. So the key is to look at one person, share an idea with them, look at another person, share an idea with them, so that you have that connection with them on a one-on-one basis. So there's the delivery aspect of it. So as a wrap-up, what are the next steps? Really is take time to target your presentation, so you know that you're delivering value to the customer. What's important to them? Plan what you want to say. 3 or 4 points, opening, body, closing. Engage your audience, both at the beginning, but also during the presentation, and make the eye contact. Pause and breathe. Thinking about being of service so you can deliver confidently when you're up in front of an audience. So, as a wrap-up, there is a free resource. It's a presentation planning guide. You can email me today at daveu@underhilltraining.com. I'll send you both this planning guide, but also that template I showed you earlier. They're great tools. It really is a summary of what we've all talked about this morning. So if there are any quick questions, I think we might have time for about one question here if anybody has one.
We have no questions in the queue right now.
Okay.
Yeah, if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so by clicking on the Q&A in the upper toolbar. Simply type your question into the field and then click Ask. And while we're giving everyone a chance to do that, any final comments or maybe a question that you receive outside of the office on a regular basis that you'd like to address?
You know, I think the two things that really were what people identified is, you know, how do I find time to do this? Mm-hmm. And how do I make sure that what I'm presenting has value? And I think we really addressed those, which is whatever it is, and these planning guides that you'll see is take the time to think about your audience and what's important to them. And it's the Microsoft messaging that I really like, which is business before technology. Have that business conversation first, then follow up with how the technology can enable them, and you'll be delivering value every time you meet with them.
Great. All right. Well, this concludes our Academy Live session. We do want to invite everyone to please continue the discussion. You can join us on our Sales Specialist group on LinkedIn after the webcast, where our cloud panel of experts will continue to answer any and all of your questions. I would like to enable really quickly our survey for the webcast, and it'll take just a second here to resolve in. If you wouldn't mind, please, before leaving, just popping in your email address to access the survey questions. 5 really quick questions, but our presenter has done an amazing job here, so this is your chance to let him know, as well as let us know how we can provide you with a better event. It's 5 really quick questions, but again, a little space for some comments there. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest possible. I want to remind you again